Imagine being reborn in a world reliant on one's skills, but when you awaken with a starless skill, your own family and village abandons you, forcing you to tame monsters and seek out others that are willing to accept you for who you are. The anime follows our MC Famisha fleeing her village at the dead of night, having escaped the capture of people from her own village by running off into the nearby forest. Traveling all night, Famisha heads to her designated hiding spot where she retrieves various bags and belongings she had prepared prior, only to start her own journey alone. Although Famisha tries unlocking various skills, she almost falls off a cliff when she pushes herself too far, so as she walks a little longer, she manages to find a dumping ground. Rummaging through the trash, she nearly gets punctured by the trash she uncovers. But having a stroke of luck, Famisha uncovers some spare clothing, a map, and some potions. With Famisha stocking up on whatever she can, she suddenly hears a beast tamer calling for his slimes to feed on the nearby garbage. And seeing as the man is hunting her as well, she rushes off into the shrubs nearby. The man suspects that Famisha must have fled to the nearest village of Latov. But worst of all, the head of Famisha's home village, Latami Village, had put a bounty on the poor girl. Seeing no reason to remain here, Famisha continues her journey through various terrains, all while sleeping where she can. But whilst heading through a lake, she is frightened by the slimes living in the water. Luckily, they aren't hostile, so she continues on her way, making her way through another forest, only to slip and slide off a nearby cliff, but it seems one of her bags snatching onto a nearby tree saved her. Making use of one of the potions she found, she declares it to be too old, seeing as it doesn't heal her wounds fully. So as she makes use of a cleaner potion, she chooses to take in the gorgeous scenery. Needing to wash off, Famisha leaves her belongings on land only to leap into the nearby river, completely captivated by the calm and serene water submerging her. Having made up her mind, Famisha declares she'll do whatever it takes to survive, and having been advised by a fortune teller to change her identity, Famisha begins cutting down her long hair. Making use of the clothing she found, Famisha declares she'll be called Ivy moving forward, plus she'll pretend to be a boy to ensure her safety, continuing her journey as she racks up more things to live off. Passing by some tall grass, Ivy takes some time to admire the small slimes living on the grass, even flicking through her monster compendium to confirm that the slime she discovered is a rare breed. Ivy is excited to have met a slime that is the weakest of its kind, a reflection for her own status, and before she can name the creature, a small gust of wind blows it off from its resting place. Chasing after the slime, Ivy feels empathy for the poor creature, and seeing as it needs help getting up, Ivy lends it a helping hand. Reading up on the slime, Ivy sees that the slime is so weak that its lifespan is less than 1 day. Therefore, there is little to no knowledge on the creature. Out of nowhere, another gust of wind sends the slime flying, but refusing to let the little creature perish. Ivy rushes to its side, even diving to protect it from disappearing into the nearby lake. With the sun setting, Ivy promises to protect the slime until it vanishes, even laying by its side throughout the night as she feels bad for weak slime. Unable to communicate with it, Ivy simply utters that the humans in her world of Ortegas are given skills when they turn 5, with her father granted a 2-star carpentry and processing skill, whilst her mother was given a 2-star needlework and 1-star mending skill. With the greater the skill determined by the higher number of stars, Ivy was randomly given the taming skill, but sadly, it was a starless skill. Immediately, Ivy's family and village turned on her and banished her. But strangely, Ivy still has memories of her past life. Ivy does mention how she ran into a very helpful fortune teller that gave her lots of books and taught her various things. And before the fortune teller passed, they gifted Ivy a magic bag that can store lots of things without getting heavy. Ivy begins to break down, seeing as she truly is alone in this world, crying that it's unfair she was born into this weak body. But Ivy does admit that her slime friend has it worse than her. Seeing as they don't have long together, Ivy declares the slime to be her first friend. But as we cut to the next morning, we see Ivy awaken to discover her slime friend is no longer by her side. Feeling the morning breeze brush up along her, Ivy can't help but feel betrayed by the gods that govern the world, falling onto her knees only to suppress her dark emotions like she always has. Remembering that the fortune teller had advised her to visit the capital, Ivy chooses to check the map she found, but surprisingly her slime friend is seen hiding between the folded map. Rushing to free the slime, Ivy says this is her first stroke of luck, and upon heading into the nearby forest, Ivy reads up on how to tame her first monster. Apparently, tamers must pass magical energy into the creatures they want to tame, and if the creature accepts the tamer can freely name the monster, and a mark will appear to signal a successful procedure. Wanting to change her life for the better, Ivy puts her Starless Tamer skill to work, focusing in only to imbue a little amount of magic into the small slime. As the slime glows, Ivy declares the slime's name will be Sora after the vast blue sky above them, and with Sora accepting Ivy as their master, Ivy declares this is her first step to carve out a future she desperately wants. In the coming days, we see Ivy setting up traps to capture field mice to keep her satiated, only to work on prepping the mice for future meals. Taking out her map, Ivy says that from her home village of Latami, she needs to head to the royal capital, but first she should stop at Ottawa village. With a gust of wind blowing, Ivy rushes to hold Sora down from floating away, but suddenly Ivy hears several beings approaching her. Stuffing Sora into her bag and running into the forest, Ivy begins climbing up a tree to hide, only to be horrified to see huge ants rummaging around for her. After a while, Ivy climbs down the tree once the ants have disappeared, noting how they need to be more careful seeing as other monsters may be around. Ivy does wonder if Sora has gotten a little bigger, but seeing as she got a scratch on her face whilst running through the forest, Ivy chooses to use up the remainder of her old blue potions to patch up her wound. Ivy could have sworn she had more blue potions, but regardless, our duo continue their journey towards the nearest village to restock, only to encounter a wanted poster of her strung up. Ivy says 500 Dao coins is a bit excessive for her capture, so Ivy tries taking down as many wanted posters of herself as she can, finally making it to the entrance of Latoto village. Placing Sora in her bag, Ivy heads through town whilst concealing her face, but immediately Ivy gets jealous seeing so many villagers using magic. Passing by a family with the sprint skill, search skill, and intimidation skill, Ivy locks onto a bakery and butcher nearby, yearning for some fresh food. Hesitant, Ivy passes by the butcher wondering if she can sell the mice she caught, but immediately the butcher declares he can smell Ivy has caught some fresh field mice with his 2-star odor skill. With the meat nicely preserved, the butcher agrees to purchase all of Ivy's meat for 100 coins, promising to do further business with Ivy if she has any future mice to sell. With money in hand, Ivy heads over to inspect the fresh bread in the bakery, but the owner asks if she can help Ivy with anything. Ivy makes up a lie and says she is visiting some relatives, so the owner helps Ivy pick out some bread, exciting Ivy as she leaves the village to devour her first real meal. Interestingly, Sora isn't a fan of the bread, and as we cut to the next day, Ivy celebrates a successful hunt as she caught plenty of mice. Coincidentally, Ivy runs into another garbage dump filled with various potions, but sadly they seem to all be quite old. When Ivy begins separating the good and bad potions, she is surprised to see Sora devour and dissolve only the blue potions whole, a skill only high-tier slimes are capable of. Sadly, Sora refuses to dissolve just any trash and only agrees to swallow up the blue potions. And as the day goes on, we see Ivy cashing in her mice for 250 coins only to purchase some more bread. Choosing to wash off in a lake, Ivy munches on some bread while she feeds Sora some more potions, a scenario Ivy wishes she could relive forever. Upon heading back to town, Ivy runs into adventurers that she recognizes as they were hunting her prior, and when the men ask to see Ivy's magic bag, she simply flees without uttering a word. Luckily, it seems they don't recognize her, and as Ivy passes by the butcher, she is horrified to see her wanted poster plastered beside his store. Sadly, when Ivy visits the baker, she notices another one of her flyers, making her run off to rest in a tree as it seems she can no longer remain in the village. Departing the next day, Ivy runs into a fork in the road, and sadly our duo are beginning to get hungry, making Ivy regret not picking up any last-minute supplies. Following the sound of water, Ivy manages to uncover a lake with several fruit growing nearby. But as she approaches the fruit tree, she is horrified to see the tree spitting out the adventurers she had met prior. With the tree whipping and lashing out towards Ivy, Ivy runs for dear life, but having sustained some damage, Ivy begins to faint. With no potions at her disposal, Ivy can only cry for Sora to flee, but strangely, Sora begins to wrap around Ivy's injured arm, all whilst Ivy falls unconscious. Flashing back, we follow Tableau checking on his wife Furef after she had given birth to Ivy, and whilst growing up, Ivy would retrieve meals for her father and brother Phaeton to eat. Phaeton would scold Ivy for eating so much, but Ivy simply enjoyed eating with her family. And as the sun began to set, our trio would return to Furef and Facilia, who would already be preparing dinner. Ivy would always be treated quite well, seeing as she was the youngest child. Plus, Facilia had the one-star soothing skill to help enhance meals and make people's fatigue go away. With Ivy almost turning 5, the family would gather and spend time building up their house, and occasionally Furef would dream of the days her 2 daughters would get married. Ivy had heard that gaining a valuable skill is the most important thing in the world, seeing as Phaeton's 3-star furniture-making skill will ensure he has a good future. And with Ivy wishing to be a powerful tamer one day, the family are suddenly interrupted by Mistress Luba, the fortune teller who has come to wish Ivy luck for her upcoming skill selection. In the past, Furef would seek Luba's advice on how Ivy spoke, seeing as she spoke of a past life. But Luba had secretly advised Ivy to keep her past life's memories a secret from others. In the present, Luba makes use of her 1-star foresight skill to confirm that Ivy's future skill is quite amazing, but sadly Luba can't confirm anything else. On the big day, we see Ivy accompanied by Tableau and Furef to get her skill unlocked, and with the priest of the village helping Ivy retrieve her skill via a ritual, he announces that Ivy has acquired the Tamer skill. With everyone excited, the priest suddenly detects something strange with Ivy, and upon seeing that her skill is starless, the priest cries out that Ivy has been abandoned by the gods. That evening, we see Tableau drinking away his sorrows as he angrily cries that it is impossible for his own daughter to be starless. And to make things worse, Tableau begins to wonder if Ivy really is his daughter. With the family falling apart, Ivy is ordered to leave their home. And as Ivy wanders alone through town, the village chief gathers up other villagers to warn them of Ivy's existence. Immediately, Ivy is ostracized by the very people she grew up with, and feeling dejected and unwanted, Ivy is forced to flee into the nearby forest. With it raining, Ivy is forced to stuff herself with wild berries and take shelter in a cave, and when Ivy tries starting a fire with the little magic she has, she ultimately fails and collapses. Luckily, Luba had come to assist her, reminding Ivy that she shouldn't strain herself due to her weak magic energy, and sadly Luba apologizes as she had already foresaw Ivy would be abandoned. Choosing to feed the poor girl, Luba offers up a magic bag and some books to help advance Ivy's knowledge for a better chance at survival. Plus, Luba advises that Ivy head to the village neighboring the royal capital. Luba says the day Ivy finds the people she can trust, Ivy must tell them about her starless skill to ensure they are people Ivy can trust. Plus, Luba promises to visit and teach Ivy as much as she can. Over time, Ivy gets used to living in the wild, and with 3 years passing, Ivy has taken a liking to scrummaging through garbage dumps in search of useful goods. As for food, Ivy had learned how to catch mice and fish, but out of nowhere, Ivy rushes to hide as she hears people coming. Hearing something is wrong, Ivy returns to the village's church, only to hear the news of Luba's passing, something that explains why Luba hasn't been visiting her as often. Creepily, Ivy listens in on a meeting between her father and the village head, where both men agree to hunt down Ivy and return her to the gods. Immediately, the village chief had rallied together with the townspeople and blamed Luba's passing on Ivy, cursing her. And with the witch hunt beginning, Ivy had no choice but to leave her former life behind in search of a new one. Waking up from her nightmare, Ivy catches glimpses of the starry night sky, and seeing Sora adorably clinging to her arm, Ivy once again falls asleep. The next day, we see Ivy awaken to Sora nudging her, surprised to see that Sora had actually healed her scar. Additionally, it seems Sora can now make faint noises, an achievement that makes Ivy tear up as she promises to live on and continue enjoying life with Sora. Waking up bright and early the next day, we see Sora squealing for Ivy to get up, both excitedly greeting the morning sun. First off, Ivy serves Sora some blue potions while she munches on some berries, surprising Ivy to see Sora has grown more sturdy. Seeing as they're running low on fruits, Ivy says she'll have to stock up on meat when she visits the village of Leam, and sadly cooking the mice she catches will only draw in the attention of nearby monsters. Seeing as Sora is still hungry, our duo venture around and stumble onto a garbage dump, and upon uncovering some funky-looking potions, Ivy begins feeding Sora old-looking blue potions. Interestingly, Sora is now willing to eat red potions as well, and upon mixing several potions together to make them either red or blue for Sora to devour, Ivy eventually continues along her journey. Along the way, Ivy makes a pit stop to stock up on some no-berries, food that Sora refuses to eat, and as the sun begins to set, we see our duo dining on some dinner. When Sora finishes their potions, it begs for more, but fearing that Sora will eat all of her potions, Ivy declares she'll tell Sora a bedtime story to put it to sleep. High up in a tree, Ivy recounts a story about a war in the past involving a king gathering a bunch of magicians to help win a war, but when the magicians peered into the future, they foresaw the end of the world. As a countermeasure, the magicians pulled together their powers to conjure an incredible spell that would avoid such a future. And legend has it that only a child from another world can recreate such a spell in case tragedy strikes again. Having fallen asleep to her own story, Ivy apologizes as she couldn't remember the rest of the story, and sadly Sora had devoured all of the potions Ivy was saving for herself. Getting to work, Ivy sets up various traps to hunt down mice, but in one of her traps, Ivy stumbles onto a snake. Frightened, Ivy makes use of a spare cloth to capture and seal the snake, and whilst heading through a forest, Ivy moves toward a strange smell nearby. Entering into a clearing, Ivy is alerted when she spots a carriage has been flipped, and upon stuffing Sora in her bag, Ivy unfortunately discovers that everyone involved had passed away. Freaked out, Ivy begins to mindlessly flee the scene, choosing to run off in a random direction, and not before long, Ivy spots the town of Leam in the distance. Entering into town, Ivy wonders where she can report the incident, choosing to head into the town hall only to see some adventurers chatting with the receptionist. When Ivy asks for help, the adventurers says Ivy should take her captured snake to an apothecary in town, but Ivy cries that she discovered some dead bodies on her way to town. Immediately, the news catches everyone's attention, prompting the guard chief to approach Ivy only to ask Ivy to recount everything she saw. When Ivy says the carriage she saw seemed ravaged and the belongings of the deceased weren't stolen, the chief declares it couldn't have been bandits, prompting everyone in the hall to begin making preparations to retrieve the corpses and hunt down the monsters. The chief and receptionist thank Ivy for the valuable intel, handing Ivy a document she can cash in later once they confirm what Ivy had said is true. Later that day, Ivy heads to the town's apothecary, and seeing as the snake is a female, the apothecary agrees to pay Ivy 3 jidal coins, the equivalent of catching 30 field mice. Seeing as they have time, Ivy chooses to visit a nearby garbage dump in search of leftover potions, and strangely Ivy stumbles on various magic bags that have been thrown away. As Sora eats its fill of potions, we see Ivy trying to stuff the magic bags inside one another, and after some trial and error, Ivy splits the magic bag into 4 groups. Apparently, some bags can hold up to 3 magic bags whilst others can't hold any, and as Ivy continues to figure out a way to stuff each magic bag into each other, we notice Sora continues to feed on the potions lying around. Having successfully figured out a way to carry all the bags, we see our duo heading back through town, but Ivy notices a crowd has formed in town. Out of nowhere, the guard chief calls out to Ivy grateful that her information led them to discover that various ogres and an ogre king was lurking outside their town, and now the town's adventurers are being sent to deal with the monsters. With the chief telling Ivy to head to the town hall to pick up her reward, Ivy greets the receptionist, only to comically raffle through her magic bags, only to hand back the document she received earlier. As a reward, the receptionist hands Ivy a silver tablet for discovering the corpses, the same amount as 5 Jidal coins or 50 mice, and to top things off, Ivy is rewarded 2 gold coins for the monster discoveries, an amount equivalent to 200 field mice. With Ivy nervous to accept the rewards, she heads through town all whilst carrying her magic bags. And with night falling, we see Ivy set up camp in town alongside other townsfolk, seeing as the forest outside is still too dangerous. With Latome Village being their next stop, Ivy says she's excited for things to come as things have been going her way recently. The next day, Ivy sees that one of her traps had been broken by accident, and with Sora running through the forest, Ivy follows after it, having smelt some blood as well. Behind some shrubs lies an Adandara, a rare monster that seems to be greatly wounded, and with the creature crying out in pain, Ivy can't help but feel sympathy for it. Before Ivy gives up hope on saving the dying soul, we see Sora suddenly spring into action as it suddenly covers the Adandara with his ooze, only to begin healing it. Not before long, Sora returns to Ivy's arms, confirming that the healing was a success. Instantly, the Adandara begins to approach Ivy, but luckily it is friendly as it begins cuddling up against Ivy. Ivy says it normally takes 5 high-ranked adventurers to slay such a scary creature, but seeing as the monster before them is so passive, Ivy agrees to let it tag along with her. Ivy says she would have loved to tame the creature if she had more magic, but sadly, she can only settle for naming the creature, opting to call the Adandara Seal. With introductions done, our trio continue on their pathing, and with Sora able to hide in Ivy's bag, Seal runs off into the forest as Ivy makes it to the next nearest town. At the entrance, Ivy is frightened by the scary-looking town guard, and coincidentally, another visitor seems to be visiting the same time Ivy is. When the man approaches the entrance, Ogudo, the town's army captain, demands to know why the man is visiting. And when the man says he is visiting a friend in town, Ogudo calls his bluff. Pinning the man against the wall, Ogudo rips open the man's bag, only to discover some illegal alcohol the man was trying to smuggle into town. Calling for his vice captain, Varivara is asked to lock the man up, and having just witnessed everything, Ivy begins to get nervous. Calming herself, Ivy soldiers on towards the gate, but is stopped by Ogudo, who asks who Ivy is, but Ivy takes the chance to help point out the bug that has landed on Ogudo's shoulder. Having defused the tense situation, Ivy utters that she hails from Latome Village, surprising Ogudo as he reports that there have been bad things happening at Latome Village. But regardless, Ogudo says Ivy should be safe now that she has arrived at Latome. Upon heading into town, Ivy is swept away by the various stores present, wondering if it's because they are near Ottawa. First things first, Ivy visits the butcher to purchase some dried meat, and with Ivy confirming that the butcher will purchase any meat she hunts, the butcher warns Ivy to be careful of the giant Nanoshi boar in the forest. Seeing as the boar may be the one destroying her traps, Ivy reasons she should rest in town for the night, only to head to the resting area for the townsfolk. Amazed by the vast resting area, Ivy gets scared seeing Roygord watching over the location, and with careful steps, Ivy asks if she can rest here for the night. With Roygord assigning Ivy a location and a permit, Ivy hears she needs to keep her permit to enter and exit, and with no payment needed, Ivy gets set up by placing down a mat to lay on. Ivy gets jealous seeing others with tents, and seeing as Sora wants to move around as well, Ivy heads back into town to look for a tent. With Ivy stumbling onto a store selling secondhand tents, she wonders how much each tent will cost, but suddenly she bumps into Ogudo, who asks what Ivy is doing. Hearing that Ivy is looking for a tent to buy, Ogudo and Varivara are saddened to see a mere child without a tent. So Ogudo declares he'll show Ivy to an old man that will solve her needs. With Ogudo dragging Ivy along, Ogudo greets Old Man Lag, only to show off Ivy. Upon hearing that Ivy is from Latami village and needs a tent, Lag agrees to build something for the poor child, asking if Ivy wants a light tent or a functional tent. Sadly, Ivy isn't too sure, as she says she can pay with silver or gold, but this surprises Ogudo as he learns Ivy had received the money by completing a quest in the previous town. With a budget of 5 jidal, Lag shows off a second-hand tent that is still in pristine condition, an item that used to belong to Lazy Joya, and it is quite light and high quality. With Lag instructing Ivy to mark the tent to claim the item as hers, Ivy instinctively writes the symbol for Sora on the tent. And as a bonus, Lag hands Ivy a magic bag to help conceal the amount of money Ivy is carrying around. As Ogudo and Varivara head back to their patrol, we follow Ivy gleefully pitching her tent in the resting area, only to head inside and let Sora out of her bag. Instantly, Sora takes a liking to the amount of space and privacy they have, and seeing as it's still light out, Ivy says they'll head in search of a garbage dump to restock on potions. As Ivy heads outside, she runs into 4 adventurers chatting, but upon seeing Ivy all alone, one of the men accuses Ivy of stealing their tent. When Ivy stands up for herself, the men begin to get aggressive as they accuse Ivy of lying and stealing their tent, and when one of the ladies begins sifting through Ivy's bags, they stumble on Sora hiding inside. When Ivy tries to flee, the men begin to get aggressive, but Roygord appears demanding to know what happened. Immediately, the men cry that Ivy stole their goods, but without hesitating, Roygord forces the men to unhand Ivy, revealing that Ogudo was the one who helped Ivy pick out the tent. Realizing they've made a mistake, the 4 adventurers ask to brush things aside, seeing as they were mistaken, but Roygord insists they come with him, even ordering for backup to restrain the 4 cocky adventurers. Roygord apologizes for what Ivy had to go through, revealing that Ogudo had actually stopped by and asked Roygord to look out for Ivy, and seeing as he wasn't able to help sooner, Roygord gives Ivy a brand new blue potion as a token of his apology. That night, Ivy and Sora enjoy a well-earned meal, but before our duo dig in, Sora begs to dine on the new blue potion Ivy had received, something Ivy can't allow.